I'm sure every single one of you has heard of the great and renowned scientist Charles Darwin. And I agree, he is essential to our field of biology. But, contrary to popular belief, Charles Darwin was not the only scientist to discover natural selection. And beyond that, he was certainly not the only scientist to propose the idea of species change and evolution. In fact, many scholars have different opinions on who to credit and for what when it comes to the theory of evolution. Many solely credit Darwin and his book The Origin of Species, published in 1859. But what about Alfred Russel Wallace and his article published in 1858, albeit with lots of quotations from Darwin's previous works? Or maybe you choose to credit Jean-Baptiste Lamarck with his publication in 1809 of Philosopher zoologique. Lamarck theorized that there is a modifying influence of particular circumstances, or that the environment influences how a species change. However, he had the mechanism very wrong. Lamarck believed that the traits acquired by a species during its lifetime could be inherited by its offspring. In essence, we can think of this as if there's a giraffe who stretches its neck every day to eat the leaves off a tree. Lamarck believed that the offspring of this particular giraffe would have longer necks than the offspring of other giraffes. However, we now know that this is not how heritability works. Unfortunately, Lamarck, Darwin, and Wallace will have to wait for another day. Let me know in the comments down below if you want to hear more about their stories. And while you're down there, make sure to like and subscribe for more science videos. Now, back to the video. Whoever you credit with the theory of evolution, it is unlikely that your mind goes to 5th century BCE, pre-Socratic, meaning before Socrates, Greek philosopher and poet Empedocles. In ancient times, it was philosophers and not scientists, as a scientific method had not been standardized until after the scientific revolution between 1500 and 1700, who argued over how life became what we see today. Classicists, historians who study the ancient Greeks and Romans, have unearthed evidence that Empedocles, an ancient Greek philosopher, may be the originator of the idea that species are not static and therefore change over time. Just like philosophers thousands of years ago, we too have an important question to ask. What's up with that? Empedocles wrote his theory that everything comes from 4 elements: water, air, fire, and earth. Obviously, we know at this point that that is not the case, unless you find yourself discovering a new avatar, an airbender named Aang. And though his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he can save anyone. But you know Aang can save the world. In that case, I would encourage you to study up on Empedocles' 4 elements. But if you don't happen to be part of the universe of Avatar: The Last Airbender, I would recommend sticking to the periodic table. I should mention that very, very little of Empedocles' work survives to today. And on top of that, he wrote very poetically, and with his metaphors, it's difficult to understand exactly what he meant. But back to the point at hand. Empedocles' theory involved chance and adaptation. He stated that processes here on Earth are dictated by 2 opposing forces, called strife and love. Love is the force which brings things together, whereas strife is the force that brings them apart. I'm choosing to use the interpretation written by David Seedley, professor of ancient philosophy, in which Empedocles states that love is the force used to create all of the creatures we see on Earth today. Empedocles goes on to explain that the 4 elements, fire, air, water, and earth, are used to create limbs. These limbs have independent purposes and exist without completed bodies. Empedocles then went on to say, and I quote, "From it, namely the earth, blossomed many faces without necks, naked arms wandered about, bereft from shoulders, and eyes roamed about alone, deprived of brows." To be honest with you, that brings about a very disturbing image of disembodied limbs walking around on the earth. But moving on. The second step in Empedocles' theory is that these limbs, which behaved as their own independent organisms with their own functions, came together to form creatures. This arrangement of limbs to form creatures is not dictated by the force of love, and is instead random and seemingly adaptive. Empedocles states, and I quote, "Many came to be double-faced and double-chested, man-faced ox progeny. Others conversely sprang up man-natured but ox-headed. Mixed here from men, here female-natured, equipped with shadowy limbs." Empedocles goes on to say that species may appear to have been constructed for a particular purpose, but really are only accidentally created in a viable form. To say all of this very simply, it's very similar to Darwin's idea of survival of the fittest. About 100 years after Empedocles' death comes along Aristotle, everyone's favorite ancient Greek post-Socratic philosopher. He disagrees with Empedocles about the idea of species evolving by chance. Empedocles did state that good trait adaptations allowed species to survive, but he said that species did not move through this proto-evolutionary process towards a specific purpose. Aristotle, on the other hand, insisted that species have in their soul an inherent purpose that they must fulfill. Aristotle believed that a species was moving towards a particular final cause. They developed traits because they were beneficial, because they moved the species further towards its specific purpose. This led to hundreds of years of Aristotelian thinking, until scientists like Wallace, Darwin, and Lamarck came along to point science back in the right direction. And that is how an ancient philosopher contributed to the discovery of evolution. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe down below, and leave me any comments or feedback that you have. Stay curious!